1022. And the purpose of this illustration is to show you how to disassemble your 1022 and reassemble it. You need to be familiar with your firearm, and the very first thing that you need to be sure of is that the firearm is unloaded and completely safe before you attempt to disassemble it or handle it. So what you do on these is pull the action back, lock the bolt to the rear, be sure there's no cartridge in the magazine or cartridge in the chamber, no round in the chamber. This firearm is completely safe. Alright, what we will first do is tell you that what you need to do when you purchase this firearm from the factory is the same as all firearms. There's a book that comes with it. Now if you do not have this book, you can write Storm Ruger and Company and they will send you this book at no charge. This has a section on safety. It's very well outlined and spelled out in detail how to handle your firearm safety, what the nomenclature of all the parts of the firearm are, and also there's a parts list in here. So I recommend know and understand your firearm before you attempt to take it apart. Alright, the first thing we're going to do, being sure that the firearm is safe, chamber is clear, cycle active. Now by doing this means the hammer is cocked. So with the hammer cocked, you put the safety on, which the safety's on. Alright, when we disassemble this, we're going to get a proper fitting screwdriver, and you loosen the screw that holds the barrel band, slide it forward, remove it. Generally it's totally discarded. Then this is your screw that goes into the front part of the receiver. Be sure the screwdriver fits properly, especially if you're going to use this stock over. Unscrew that screw. And it won't come all the way out because it has a relief on it. So just unscrew it all the way where it's free of the receiver. And then you see the safety's on. Now what you have to do is be sure the safety's in the middle. So you push your safety over just slightly so it's in the center. This way it'll clear the wood when you remove the barrel and receiver from the stock. So gently take it out. Here you have the receiver and the barrel. This will be the part that we're working on mostly. So we will start on the bench work after this. Alright, with an 1/8 inch punch, which you can use for all the pins in a Ruger 1022, generally the pin that holds the trigger group assembly to the receiver, generally they're loose enough you can push them out. If you have to, you can use a small hammer. But you push those two pins out. Here's your trigger group. There's your two retainer pins. Here's your receiver. Now you see your receiver, here's your operating bolt and your operating spring and spring guide. Now you cannot remove this bolt without taking this bolt stop pin out. So this stop pin has to be driven out, and it's the largest of the three pins that holds these together. This one happens to be one that I have staked. Generally they just fall out. Alright, we can go ahead and take it all the way out. Sometimes you have to look for parts. Alright, that's your largest pin. Now what you can do later on, this is the part that if you put a buffer in your 1022, that's the pin that the buffer replaces. Alright, now with that pin out, the breech block can come further back to the rear. So holding the breech block to the rear, then you hold it back to the rear, and then you take your operating handle and you hold on to it and you turn it where it's straight and you jiggle it, and generally it comes unlatched from the breech block. And then this handle comes out just like that. There's your operating spring and operating spring guide, your handle, and it has a little bushing on it up there to keep it from binding. And here's your breech block. Now the breech block It contains the firing pin, the extractor, and of course the extractor has a plunger and plunger spring, and that's how it is maintained in the breech block. And the firing pin is maintained in the breech block by this roll pin. This is a split pin, and that's what holds the firing pin in the breech block. And there's a small spring in this area right here, and when we remove this, I'll show you that spring. This is the removal of the firing pin. You put a proper fitting punch on the split pin, gently drive it out. Now you don't have to drive it out all the way, just drive it out far enough that it releases the firing pin. You see the firing pin move back, take the punch out, here's the firing pin. Now, down inside here is a small spring. And you see this spring, one end has a closed end. So generally the closed end of a spring is the operating end of a spring. In other words, if one end's stationary and the other end is moving, and if one end's closed, generally the moving end is a small closed end. So when you put this back together, you want to be sure this spring is back in here in the proper place. And all you have to do is drop it back in that groove, put it down, push it forward against the stop, look in there to be sure you're behind. There's a small stop pin that's in the bolt crossways. Be sure you're behind it, not on top of it. So you put the pin back in, or the spring back in, with the end behind the stop pin and the tapered end towards the firing pin. And you put the firing pin back in. Generally, at this point, when you do this, you would be replacing this with a titanium firing pin. But for illustration right now, we'll replace the factory, just put the factory firing pin back in. Now you see this split pin, you want to be sure that this split pin, the solid area of that pin is to the rear, because that's the part that stops the firing pin from going any further forward when the hammer hits it, is the back edge of that split pin. So you wouldn't want the split side to the rear because it would be weak. So put a solid side of the split pin to the rear, and then when the hammer hits this, firing pin goes forward, stops against that cross pin. Alright, now while we have the bolt here, the breech block, this is the factory extractor. Simple way to remove that extractor. Sometimes you can just pull it back with a little scribe and take it out with your fingers. This is a scribe, a small 1/16 punch of work, and you put that in front of the plunger, pull it to the rear, backwards behind the extractor. Alright, now the plunger is back and I'm holding back, and all that extractor has to do, sometimes they'll roll out. This one's a little bit stubborn. So when I run across one that's stubborn like this, what I do, I use long nose pliers. Pull the plunger to the rear against the compression of the spring, hold it back, reach down there and pick up that extractor, and it'll lift straight out. Well, this one's supposed to. There we go. Right there. And you gotta be careful whenever you let that plunger fly that it don't fly out and you have to hunt for it. Here's your plunger and extractor spring right here. So we're putting it back. You do it exactly in reverse. Put the spring in with the plunger in. Here you don't need the long nose pliers. You can just hold the extractor in your fingers. Be sure now you don't let the plunger slip off the end of the scribe or small punch you're using. Scratch all. Most anything will work. Pull it back, drop the extractor down in the hole, let it fly, check it. It engages. That's all there is to it. Normally we'd be replacing this with a titanium extractor. Alright, this is your trigger guard assembly. And you see, maybe it'd be wise to note some of the parts of this. This is your magazine latch right here, this plunger. You see that little hole in it? That's what locks your clip your 10-shot rotary magazine into the firearm, and it's actuated by this release here. So when you push this up, see how the linkage of that pushes that back, and that lets you get the clip or magazine out. Alright, and here's your bolt latch. Now if you'll notice on the Ruger 1022s, when you hold the bolt open, you pull this back like this and the bolt stays open. Then you have to manipulate this a little bit to get it to go down. So what you do is push it back and up and forward like that, and it'll drop down. This is the part that holds the breech block back. So once you get used to doing it, it's not too bad, but it's a whole lot easier to interchange this with an aftermarket, what they call an auto bolt release. So when we take this apart, well, that's one of the items that we'll be changing out. So that's maintained by this pin here, and this is one of the smallest, longest pins in the Action. Like I said, generally you just push them out, and that's this piece right here. You can push back on that, that falls out right there. There's your plunger and your spring that holds your magazine in, and then this bolt lock right here, it won't come out until you take these other pins out. This is your ejector. So when the firearm fires and the pressure from the cartridge blows the breech to the rear, the extractor is latched into the rim of the case, and when it comes to the rear, a lot of people think that this is what hits it. Well, it is what hits it if you don't have a magazine in it. But if you look at the magazine on a 1022, and if you'll notice, the magazine has a square corner right here. This is actually the part that works as an ejector that ejects the spent cartridges or a live round, if you're extracting it from the chamber, out of the Action, is that part right there. But if you shoot it without the magazine or clip in it, then this is the ejector that does the job. So in order to remove it, now it's wise to look in here to see how the arrangement is. You see the hammer's cocked, safety's on. We take the safety off, hold the hammer. Now don't let the hammer fly forward, because if you do, sometimes it'll fly forward and the hammer, spring, and plunger will fly out of the Action, and you'll have to be looking for it. And not only that, if that does happen, I have had that happen, and I've had this little keeper split right in half. And then instead of looking for one assembly like this, you're looking for 3 different parts, and you have to find a keeper to replace that. So that's one reason you don't want to let the hammer fly forward. But you can take the spring tension off the hammer, let it go forward, hold it from flying forward, and gently lift this out. So there's your hammer strut, hammer spring, and keeper. Okay, hammer's forward now, so there's no spring tension, so it don't matter where it's at. You can push it back to look. And you see this spring goes around the hammer bushing, and the end of this spring is held under tension, and that's the spring that operates your bolt stop. So when we get this apart, you'll see. And when you push this pin out, you'll see that spring fly up. See that spring right there? This is the end that flew up. The other end goes down in, it goes in a little groove on your bolt stop. So when you put it back, you have to put it back with the offset portion down and on top of the bolt stop, and then you depress this, hold it down like that, push that pin over, and when you're going back. But anyway, we're going to disassemble it now. So you can take this pin completely out. Alright, and that'll let your extractor, or your ejector rather. Now some of these are tight. This one happens to be tight in the receiver. A lot of them just fall out, some of them's tight. But this is your metal permanent fixed ejector. Alright, now with that pin out, here's your bolt stop. This is your factory bolt stop. And you see this notch right here in it? That's the reason that when you pull it back and lock it open, then you have to manipulate this a little bit, because the cross pin sitting right here, you have to manipulate it to get it over that point and up here in order to get the bolt, this to drop down, the bolt to go forward. So that's your bolt stop. Alright. Hammer pivot pin. Remove it. Alright. Hammer comes out. You see how it came out now? You want to notice, observe this. Unless you're used to doing it, you'll have to do some thinking and looking at the drawings. But this is your spring, and it goes back on exactly like that, just like it come off. Lay the spring out. This is your hammer bushings. You have two of them. The small end of the bushing goes in the hammer. And what that does, that supports the hammer. It gives you a relief area that this spring can ride on, and it holds your hammer more or less into the center part of your trigger group. So there's your two hammer bushings and your hammer. Alright, now the next part gets a little bit trickier. Taking it apart's not the problem. Putting it back together is the problem. So this is your trigger pivot pin. Like I said, if you can't push the pins out, you'll have to have the aid of a small hammer and a punch. So push that out. Your trigger comes out. There's your trigger, sear, disconnector, and between the two is your disconnector spring. So you see how that goes. That's just the way it is, and you put it back exactly the same way. We can go ahead and take it the rest of the way apart while we got it here. There's your disconnector spring. I'm sorry, this is your sear. This is your sear spring. Now this is your disconnector. Now if you take that disconnector out, generally, a lot of times those pins are tight. Alright, this is your disconnector right here. Disconnector pin. And see, this sits in there just like that when we go back together. Just like that. And there's your trigger. Alright, now the only thing we have left, here's your trigger plunger, trigger return plunger, and spring. Alright, now you have the safety. Now the safety sometimes is a problem for some people because there's a strong spring in a recessed hole drilled down towards the trigger guard area and a small plunger with a very sharp point on it that maintains the safety, and it gives you the click sound in the safety. So there's a couple ways you can get it apart easy. One of them, you can take the safety, push it on, rotate the safety, trying not to scratch it. Rotate it to a position to where the largest diameter of the safety is holding the plunger down. And then all you have to do, once you get it rotated and that's holding it down, simply push it out. Now getting it out doesn't seem to be much of a problem. But if you'll notice, get that, see that little plunger and spring? A hollow plunger, spring goes in it like that. Getting it back together is not always the easiest thing. Most of the time you don't have to take the safety out. Whenever you buy the aftermarket parts, unless you buy a left-handed safety or ambidextrous double big-headed safety like we manufacture, most of the time you don't need to mess with taking the safety out of your receiver. I'll show you how to put this back in here shortly, and then later on when we go to putting our parts back together, I'll show you how to put an aftermarket safety in by just rotating this safety to the right position and taking the other aftermarket safety, put it against it and push it through, and it'll snap right into place after the firearm is completely assembled. So here you have it. This is all the parts of the Ruger 1022. We can take the barrel off while we're here. This takes a 5/32 Allen wrench. Generally you can use the short end and break them loose because sometimes they're in there pretty tight. Now if you over tighten these, when you put the barrels back in them, or an aftermarket barrel back in them, I've had these blocks split right here. So you want to be sure the barrel goes all the way in and tighten them good and snug, but you don't have to over tighten them. For speed, you can use a Allen wrench that has a ball on the end. two screws. Here's your draw block. Those two screws go down through the draw block. Now the barrel generally, now sometimes you have to pull a lot of them off, but most of the time they'll come off easy. Now you see this V notch right here that's machined in the bottom of the barrel. That's the part the draw block goes in, and the two long screws pull it back in the receiver against this shoulder. So when the breech block goes forward, it actually goes forward and the extractor goes into this notch right here in the back of the barrel. And that's why your headspace is set up by the relief on the face of your breech block, and the breech block actually goes forward clear to the steel or the back of the barrel. Alright, put the barrel back on. Right now we'll put the factory barrel back on. Later on we'll put a aftermarket custom barrel on when we do this. Run them wrenches, run them screws down. You don't want to get carried away with a ball Allen wrench, because you can actually break the ball off in the small portion, and then you got the ball part of it sometimes floating around inside that head of that socket set screw, and sometimes they're hard to get out. You can put the short end in it, pull it up good and snug. I suppose if you had an inch-pound wrench on it, you'd probably look at something like 50 or 70 inch-pounds. Would be ample. So there's the barrel back and receiver. Now we're going to start putting the parts back together. Since we have the receiver here, what we'll do is put the breech block and the operating spring assembly in the receiver first. And when you put this back in, it goes through here, through your ejection port. The sharp end of this goes in this hole right here, that little, actually it's a detent. And that goes in just like that. Alright, now what we're going to do is compress this spring while holding this operating handle back, and then we're going to drop this breech block in. See, we have the stop pin out, so the breech block's going to drop in. Sometimes you have to jiggle this around a little bit to get it to engage in this notch across the breech block. So your operating handle has to engage across this notch here. So see if we can get it to the rear. You hold her back like that. Put the breech block in. Put it down on the front of it. Jiggle it a little bit. There we are. Now, I might mention, if you have the barrel out, you don't want to put the breech block in and let it fly forward without the barrel in here, because if you do, that steel breech block will actually put a burr or damage the aluminum front of the receiver here. So when you're operating a breech block and letting it fly back and forth, you always want to be sure that the barrel's in the receiver. Alright, now while we're at this point, we'll go ahead and put the breech block stop pin in. Alright, see, that's free. Okay, we'll set that aside. Now, on the trigger guard, remember the last thing we took out was the safety, so when you go back, you need to go back in reverse. So we're going to put the safety in first. So sometimes this can get tricky. A lot of times you can drop that in there. You can drop it in, line it up with a punch, and it'll go right in the hole. And if you have trouble doing this, you can always put some grease on it, like thick grease, Vaseline or something like that. Let's see if I have some. Here's a little regular grease, like out of a grease gun for your automotive. Okay, now we're going to get this down in this trigger group, and that end with the grease on it is going to go down in the hole, and we're going to get it maintained down there. Now, grease will keep it in position, and then you have to compress it in order to get the cross pin, or the safety I should say. This has to be compressed in order to get the safety. Must be in my old age I'm having a little trouble here. There's always a way around it. You can't do it like this with a punch, which usually I do. There we go. Alright, we're ready to put the safety in. Remember now, the red part of the safety goes on the left hand side. And these detents right here on the safety go down towards the spring and plunger we just put in there. Now what the secret is to get this in there, get it lined up, and then you go down in there with a punch and you hold the end of that spring and plunger down, compress it. Now if you slip off, that thing will fly across the room, and all you gotta do is hold it down to get the safety in. There we go. Alright, there you have it. Safety's in function, positive clicks. Alright, now we're ready to install the trigger return spring and plunger. Now if you'll notice, the factory spring is one end smaller. The smaller end goes over the plunger like that. Now I like to put some grease on them, and that keeps them from falling out. Don't have to use this much grease, but some. Alright. All you have to do is put it back in the hole like that. Now see, that'll stay in there, so we can work on the trigger and get it assembled and put it in there, not worry about that falling out. So now we're ready to assemble the trigger. And you put the disconnector back in the trigger with the disconnector pin through it. This is your sear. This is the edge that hooks into the hammer. This is the back edge. This corner here, the front edge of the disconnector latches under that, and that's how that operates. So you put the spring in where it belongs, drop that in there, line them up, and you line up the hole. Now here's where you need the cheater pin to reassemble. And this little pin is 1/8 inch in diameter and 7/16 long. Now anything will work as long as it's not longer than the width of the trigger, which is roughly 500 or a 1/2 inch. So we use a 7/16 inch pin, line it up, put it in there like that. Alright, this is, all those parts are together, and you see how they work. Whenever the action comes back, the hammer cocks, the ears of the hammer push down on the disconnector, right like this. Those ears right there push down on that, release it, let the sear jump up, and then the sear jumps up and catches the hammer hook, and the hammer's cocked. Then when you let off of the trigger slides forward. That means this area moves down, and the disconnector slides off the back or the rear part of the sear and latches underneath it. And that's when you feel that little click when you let the trigger go forward, when that latches under it, and then you can get on the trigger and apply pressure for the next shot. So that's how that works. So all you have to do is put the cheater pin in, drop it down on the top, line that up like that, put a little pressure on it, trigger pin. Alright, that's free and works. Alright, now the next thing we'll do, we'll go ahead and put the plunger and spring in here for the magazine catch assembly. Now, the width of this release here drops into the groove on that plunger. So you hold the plunger to the rear. Generally, it's a little easier to hold than that. Got to be sure that the spring don't get pinched in it. The spring drops right in there like that. There we go. Spring was a catching it. Alright, and this drops in just like this. Alright, when you get it in there like that, let off, and it'll maintain, it'll stay in there. Alright, then you look through and line up the holes, run you a punch through there, line the hole up. Alright, now you're ready for the bolt stop. Now it goes down in there right from the top, just like that. Now remember earlier I said that this spring we was talking about with a little offset in it, when you assemble that back together, that offset part goes right in that notch right there. So that's what puts spring tension on your bolt stop. Alright, we'll drop the bolt stop in. You notice this end's slotted. So you drop it in so the slotted hole lines up. Replace the pin. Sometimes you have to get a little help. Alright, now the next thing we'll do, we'll install the hammer. Remember the bushings go on the hammer, the small side of the bushing goes in the hammer, one on each side. Now you remember this spring we talked about? Lay it on the hammer like that, hold it just like that. Now you have to have the safety off, slide the hammer in, safety off, line up the hole, and we're ready to put the hammer pin in. Hopefully we can get it in here. There we go. Alright, now there's your spring with the offset in. So now what we can do, we can put, here's your ejector, and here's your pin. Now to put this pin in, slide it through here, put your ejector over the pin, like that. Alright, now the spring, you have to depress the spring, blow the pin, now slide the pin over, see, and that's what maintains the end of that spring. Now your ejector on this gun, if you remember, or this trigger group was tight, so all we got to do is get it over to the left and get it down in that groove. Most of them will fall in, you can just put them into your finger. Alright, now the hammer's installed. Now we're ready for the hammer strut, the spring, and the keeper assembly. Now I didn't show you how to take this apart a while ago, so there's various techniques to taking these apart, but I'll show you real quick how I do it. Usually you can put it in a vise, round end down. Alright, now you see this keeper is split. And what you can do when you take it apart, most any set of pliers that has a cutting edge on them, you can slide them over that, pull it down, and slide that keeper off just like that. There you have, there's your keeper, there's your spring, there's your strut. Put it back on, place the spring over that, put the pliers over the spring, depress the spring, grip it, slide the keeper on, keep losing it. Split side of the keeper, goes on like that, and then open the pliers, there you are. Generally whenever you put a hammer and trigger kit in, you have to put an extra power hammer spring in. So with the hammer forward, place this just like that, down in the hole, keeper end down, engage it in the groove in the hammer. Trying to get away from me here. Try this again. Okay, place that down in that groove, in the hole, rather. Push it back. Okay, see, just in the groove, like that. Now it's engaged. See, and you can cock the hammer, pull the trigger. Remember, like I said, don't let it fly forward or it'll fly out. Alright. Hammer's cocked. See if the safety works. Safety works. Okay, now when we assemble it, we'll leave it in a cocked position and the safety on. Alright, now the trigger group's assembled. Ready to go. To put it back in. The breech block is forward. Hammer cock, safety on. All you got to do is set that in there like that. Line up your cross pin holes. That one fell in. This one here is a little Right there. Push the safety off. Ready to go. Everything works. Pull the bolt back, see if your catch works. Catch works. There you are. Now, simply to put it back in the stock, remember I said you put the safety about in the middle. Put it in first like that. Safety's about in the middle so it clears the wood. Push it back. Tighten your screw. Be sure you get a proper fitting screwdriver. Put the barrel band back on. Tighten the screw there. Should be ready to go out and test fire. That should be just like it was when we took it out of the box. Alright, the next thing we'll do, we'll talk about the aftermarket products, and we'll disassemble this firearm, and then I'll show you about putting the aftermarket products in. This is a display poster here of all the products that we manufacture for the 1022. I'll go through them and explain them a little bit and some of the unique qualities that they have. This is a titanium firing pin. This actual firing pin here is 43% lighter than what the steel factory firing pin was that came with your firearm. Since we manufactured this titanium firing pin, we also make a precision tool steel firing pin to replace your factory one if you so desire to have a tool steel firing pin. Okay, this is your extended operating bolt handle assembly. Has a stainless steel spring guide, a 4-ounce heavier compression spring, your main operating spring, and this measures 4 ounces heavier whenever it's compressed. And then this handle here is approximately 3/8 or so longer than what the factory steel handle is. This complete assembly weighs a little more than 50 grams less than what your factory steel assembly is, plus it's 3/8 or so longer than your factory one with a hook on it, so you can get a hold of it and operate your action easier. Alright, your titanium trigger, basically we changed the profile. It's lower. Of course, it is made out of titanium. It has an adjustable over-travel stainless steel screw in it. And this is important to get the best feeling trigger that you can get. That way you don't have any more than a minimum amount of backlash or trigger over-travel. When it's properly adjusted, it gives you a lot better feeling trigger pull. Extended magazine release, titanium. The current ones that we make now is a little bit shorter than this one on display and also has grooves in it. Alright, then we go to the hammer and sear pack. Contains a hammer which is lighter, has a different profile than what the factory one does. If you'll notice, this front angle here has changed a little bit. So the power of the hammer is all transferred up here at the top where it hits the firing pin. We have a custom made sear. You'll notice if you lay a factory sear alongside it, you'll see a considerable difference in this area right here. And one thing I'll mention, if you look at a factory sear, they usually have a little notch right here. Well, sometimes the point of that sear engagement on a factory sear is narrower than what the width of the hammer hook is, and that causes you a creepy trigger. There's no need to have that notch in that area. So we put a radius relief here, but our angle here is always longer than the depth of the hammer hooks. This is an extra power hammer spring, an extra trigger pivot pin that fits our titanium trigger and our sear much closer than what the factory one does. This shortest spring is a disconnector spring, The longer spring is the trigger return spring, which is actually the one we're using right now as a replacement for your factory trigger spring. And then this is the cheater pin that I talked to you earlier about when we was assembling the other 1022. These shims here, we usually send out 2 shims. We recommend putting them between the sear and the trigger. That prevents corner rub like this area here inside your trigger. So we use these shims as a boss. We also sell these shims in kits of 10 of one size, and some customers like to put these shims between the trigger and the trigger group, and I have put as many as 6 shims in a 1022 just in this size here on the sear. Now your hammer shims, they go between the hammer bushing and the hammer, and we provide 2 each with each kit. Here again, they're available if you want extra ones. Alright, we'll go up here. Here's a titanium extractor. It'll work both on the 1022 Magnum, on the Mark II pistol, and also the 1022. We make additional titanium 1022 Magnum firing pins and steel 22 Magnum firing pins. Here's a patent which I just received not too long ago on a double big-headed safety. And it's pretty much self-explanatory. Larger, bigger, easier to get to, easier to operate. This one of our best sellers is small 1022 receiver mount, which uses the holes that's drilled and tapped in the top of your receiver. It's one of the real hot items, and if you look at the price for $14.95, and then if you're using a more powerful scope, like a 6-20 scope, which some people do on their 1022s, you'll notice that you're almost out of elevation on your zero whenever you use a more powerful scope on your 1022. That's because of the arrangement of the V-block holding the barrel in the receiver. If the barrel is a little bit loose in the receiver, when you tighten up the V-block, it pulls the muzzle down at 6 o'clock, and therefore when you put a receiver mount on the receiver and mount one of these larger target scopes which has less adjustment and elevation, sometimes you're right at the very end of your elevation to get them to zero in. So we make a larger target base which is tapered, and this allows for the adjustment that you need, so you'll be closer to your center of your elevation if you use a target scope. So that's why we call this our action base. And you can mount it on the receiver with these 4 holes corresponding to the receiver, and then we added 2 more holes here that if you like you can also drill and tap the barrel and add 2 more screws here. Now what I do generally when we're completely done with working on a 1022, the very last thing we do is mount this type of a base on it, and I set it in DevCon because there's a difference from the top of the receiver to the barrel on 1022s. Generally these have a 5 to 7 thousandths clearance between the barrel and the bottom of this base. So if you set the whole base in some material like DevCon, I use aluminum DevCon, put the screws in it, already have it drilled and tapped, mount these 2 screws, just pull them up snug, not enough to spring the base down all the way to the barrel, and just pull them up snug, and then wipe off all the excess DevCon. When that sets up, that makes the barrel and receiver very rigid. And that's one of the problems with the 1022 is the receiver is made out of aluminum and it's springy. And when you use a base only on the receiver, with the receiver being springy, it's not locked as solid to the barrel as what it probably should be for the best accuracy that you might want. So that's one of the reasons this is a popular base. It's both in black and silver. Of course, this one's in black and silver too. We sell Buffer Technologies recoil buffer. That's the one that we use. There's other ones on the market, but we like this one because they was one of the first ones that designed them and made them, and they have patent covering that. And then we also got the Ruger 1022 titanium extended auto bolt release. Now if you notice earlier I told you or showed you when you pull the breech block back and lock it open, then you have to manipulate the bolt release to get it to go forward. Well, with this, you just hold back in this area here. When you pull the breech block back, it locks open. Then when you say put another clip in, another magazine, all you have to do is put the magazine all the way up, reach up and hit the operating handle to the rear, just bump it. This spring load will drop down and the breech block will automatically drop shut quick. We also make these extended. They're basically the same. They're extended on this end for the 22 Magnums, and this end's extended about 1/8 of an inch and serrated more, so it's easier to get a hold of it there with your finger. And of course, here's your extra shims that we make. But basically, that's about all we manufacture for the 1022 at the present time. So we'll go through and install each of each one of these items, and I'll show you how that's done. All right, what we're going to do, we're going to start with this stripped trigger group housing here, and we left the safety in it, because later on I'll show you how to put that big headed safety in there real easy. All right, first thing we do on that is you take, here's the factory trigger return spring and plunger. Now what I did, here's our replacement spring. You place it over that plunger. Now what you can do, if you want to, I'd recommend polishing this plunger. Polish the front of it here because it slides on the back of the trigger and it doesn't stay exactly in the same place. So if you polish that bright, polish the sides bright, and then right here at this little sharp corner edge right here where it goes into the hole in the trigger guard. Now you gotta remember the trigger guard's made out of aluminum, and if you'll notice, this hole is drilled in from an angle like this in order to get it in there. It's not straight in because of the access to that area. So it's drilled in at this angle. So when you apply pressure to the trigger to the rear, it's always pushing that plunger at a little bit of an angle. It's not pushing it straight back. So what I like to do is take this plunger and polish just a slight bevel there on the corner, just enough it's not a chisel edge. Because if you leave that sharp chisel edge in there, a lot of times that'll start digging into that aluminum back here in the back of the trigger guard, and it'll cause your trigger to creep. So basically I polish the plunger, put a little slight bevel right there, very slightly, not even probably 5/1000 bevel. And then I put the spring on it and we're ready to go in with that plunger. Here again you can put a little grease on it. That'll keep it from falling out. So it'll stay in there. Okay. Trigger, plunger, and return spring is in there. Alright, now the next thing we do, we need to put our trigger assembly together. So here's our titanium trigger, and we have the disconnector from the factory disconnector. Now sometimes when you put these together, you have to drive these pins because they're usually tight in this hole. Notice the factory just fell in and fell out. So this takes up a little bit more of the looseness there. So there's your disconnector installed in the trigger. Now we're going to use the sear. Now at the present time I'm not going to put the shims in on this sear. So all we do is put the sear and disconnector spring in, place the sear in there just like we did in the factory trigger earlier. Line the spring up, be sure it's engaged in the disconnector hole. Alright, and that little cheater pin, it goes through the trigger and through the sear. Alright, and you check it to be sure it works. See, disconnector works. Alright, that's ready to be installed. So all we do is put it in, drop it in there just like we did with the factory one. Line the pin up with the hole there. Use your new pin that comes with your hammer and sear kit. As it drives in, it pushes the cheater pin out on that side there. There's your cheater pin. You keep it because you're probably going to need it again a little bit later on. Alright, trigger's free. Safety's on. Now, when we go to put the hammer in, we need to have the safety off, so I'll push it off right now. Okay. Now what we'll do, we'll go ahead and put these other parts in first, so we don't have to be chasing them around here. Let me send your magazine catch plunger. Hold it back. Now, here we use our titanium extended magazine release. Holding the plunger back, slide it in there, engage in the relief on the plunger, and it'll stay in there by itself, just a spring tension on that latch. So you line up the holes here, so when you put your pin in, it won't be hard to do. Now while we're doing this, we can take this extended bolt stop. See, this is a factory one. You see how much longer this one is than the factory. You can tell just by looking at it. So we're going to replace the factory one. That's all we had to do. Shouldn't have to fit anything. Just replace it. It drops in from the top, slides in right alongside your bolt release with a slot in it, lines up with the holes. Alright. All the holes in the parts are lined up. Put the pin in. Be sure it's flush. Be sure it's free. Alright. See, that's going to work. Alright, now what we can do at this time, I like to put in the other pin that holds the ejector in, because the end of it holds the top edge of the bolt stop. So I slide it in part way, put the ejector on it, pull the ejector down. Remember, this is the one that was tight. Alright, so that pin's in that position. Now we're ready to put the hammer in. So there's the aftermarket Power Custom hammer, and we use the 2 bushings, and here's the spring. So chances are we won't have to take that hammer out anymore, so I'll go ahead and put these shims on the side of it. They go over the small side of the bushing, like that. It snaps in right there. Alright, and we use a spring just like we did when we had the factory hammer. Put it with the offset forward, safety off, slide the hammer in there. Most of the time they'll go. I have found in 1 or 2 that the any more than 2 of those shims is too much. And I have found 2 of them making the hammer a little bit snug. But sometimes you'll take 4 or 5 of them if you want to take all the movement out. Depress that spring, and then push the pin over so it maintains the spring. Now there's your hammer. Now we're ready for the main spring, the hammer spring rather, and strut assembly. So what we'll do, we'll put a stronger spring, which is supplied with the kit. Like I say, there are several different ways of changing this. This just happens to be the way I do it. When you're changing the spring, it don't matter about the spring you're taking off, because you're probably never going to use it again. So you can just stick the pliers in there, around it, push it down, take the keeper off. There's the spring, not damaged. Put the extra powered spring on it. Get the keeper right where you know where it's at. Slide down the pliers, slide the keeper over the strut. Here, it'd be all thumbs. Anyway, we slide the keeper over the strut like that. That's the way it should have been right off, see? Just like that. Alright. Now, place it in there just like we did with the hammer, the factory hammer. Okay, hammer cocks. Alright, now we're going to try to put the safety on. Now here's where you have to take it all back apart. See the safety, it won't go on. Now if you read the instructions, they'll tell you to take it apart and you stone part of the point of the lower part of the sear off. Well, I found out an easy way to do that. You still have to take it apart, but see the safety won't go on. Be sure the hammer's cocked. Take that safety, plastic handle screwdriver, bump it till it's retightened pretty hard, like that. Now we're going to take it all back apart, and you'll see a mark on the point of that sear, and we can stone down right to that mark. You got to look real close. Right there on the point, see right there, there's a little mark right there. It's not very much, probably 5 more thousandths it would have probably worked. But it's on that side right there. See, when you're pointing the firearm away from you, push the safety on from left to right and it won't go on. So it's on the left side. There's a tiny mark right there. So there are several ways of doing this. If you have a real sharp file, they'll just barely cut that metal. Now you can also do it with a stone. Put it in a vise, get you a stone, usually something about like a medium India stone. Stone it right down to that mark. Okay, now I stoned it right to the mark. Now I want to put just a slight little, don't want no burr on the corner. And also, if you like, instead of stoning it straight across like the factory, you can put just a little bit of an angle on it, like a 5-degree angle. So when the safety goes on, as you push it on, it actually jams the sear tighter up into the hammer hooks. So you can put about a 5-degree angle like that on it. Bevel it right there, just slightly. And we'll put it together and chances are it'll work. Before, without putting that little mark on there, what you have to do is take it apart, stone it a little bit, put it all back together, and try it. And if it didn't work, take it apart again. Now you can also put some blue Dykem on that sear when you first put it in the first time, and it'll mark much easier than that. But you generally, if you look at it, the metal to metal, you'll see a mark. So we just put it back together just like we did a while ago. Disconnector spring, sear and the trigger and the disconnector all engaged together. Cheater pin. Now, hopefully we won't have to take it apart anymore. So now's the time I'm going to get a little brave here, and we're going to put the shims in it. So what you do, you push your cheater pin over just far enough you can slide a shim in between the sear and the trigger. You just slide that in like that, line that up with the hole. Usually you can push your cheater pin in with your finger on the other side, and you push it through from the other side. Do the same thing and put this other shim on this side of the sear. Get it lined up, slide it right in line with the hole. The cheater pin will hold it in. Right there, then you check to be sure it works. Alright, we're ready to put it back together. So here we go. Plunger's still stuck back there, thanks for the grease. Okay, line the holes up. cheater pin fell out the back. Trigger's free. Take the hammer, put the spring back on it just like we did a while ago. Slide it in. Line the holes up. Put in the hammer pivot pin. Alright. Now see, we don't have this spring captured anymore. So what we have to do, push this pin back just a little bit. Depress that spring. Slide the pin over. So it's captured. Of course the hammer's cocked now. So what we do is put the mainspring plunger, or the hammer strut rather, the hammer strut, it got away over here. Put the hammer strut assembly back in. Check it. Okay, it works. Now let's check the safety. Safety goes on, see? It's plenty tight. But the safety starts there, starts on, and then it's getting a little bit tighter. Chances are if you work it a few times, it'll be just right. There you go. Safety on, safety off, safety on. Alright. Now's a good time to check the pull of the trigger. Just for the heck of it. Now generally, what happens, I need to explain to you about these. A lot of times the relationship of the center of this pivot pin hole of the hammer versus the center of the pivot pin hole for the trigger are different distances. Now the most I've ever seen them has been 23 thousandths difference from the narrowest one, space from here to here, to the widest. Well, they'll usually run plus or minus 7 thousandths. So if you happen to have one that has a little bit of what they call accumulation of manufacturing tolerances, and these spacings are further apart, that'll make your trigger pull a little bit heavier. And if they're a little bit closer together, it'll make your trigger pull a little bit lighter. So what we do, we try to adjust our hammer and trigger kits here in the shop, so when you receive them, they should weigh around 2 3/4 pounds. Some of the guns, they'll weigh 2 1/2, maybe a little bit lighter. Other ones, they'll weigh 3 1/4. So we're right in the area of 2 1/2, 2 3/4 pounds on most 1022s. There are a few exceptions, and if the exception is too far out, then that means you're going to have to change the angle of the sear a little bit to get your trigger pull lighter or heavier. But generally, you shouldn't mess with it. Leave it just like it is. So what we'll do, if I can find a pull gauge, we'll just check it. When you're doing it without being into the receiver, you want to catch the hammer with your thumb, see? Okay, here we go. There's 2, 2, 2 1/4, 2 3/4. Almost 3 pounds on this one. Let's check it again. Two and a half, well, 2 3/4, right at 2 3/4 pounds. That's about the way we set them on the shotguns. Yeah, right at 2 3/4. All right, now, you see we have an over travel screw in the trigger. So what we need to do is adjust this over travel so when the trigger's pulled to the rear, right at the time the sear disconnects from the hammer hooks, the trigger stops. See how the trigger goes back a little bit further right there? Pull it back, hammer falls, and the trigger goes back that much, see? So what we're going to do is use a 1/16 inch Allen wrench and adjust this screw. So that means we're going to turn it clockwise to screw it in. Okay, 1/16 inch Allen wrench. Now these are assembled with medium strength Loctite, and you can generally adjust them 3 or 4 times before they get so loose you have to put more Loctite on them. Okay. Now what I do, I usually screw it in so tight that the the hammer won't drop. Still needs a little bit more. Okay, right there. See, the hammer won't drop. Okay, then I'm pulling the trigger. Turn the Allen wrench. There we go. Now, see, won't quite drop right there. We need just a little bit more. Now I'm turning it counterclockwise because I had it actually too tight. I'll turn it a little bit more. There we go. Now when you pull the trigger and you check it, not only do you want to pull straight back on the trigger, but push it a little bit to the left and then pull a little bit to the right to be sure you got enough over travel that it'll work every time. So there you go. Safety works, over travel adjusted. This is ready to install in the receiver. So we still have the breech block assembly. And of course this one's the same bolt or breech block stripped out. So what we're going to do with it is put in a titanium firing pin. Remember we had the firing pin spring. We use the same one that comes with the factory. Okay, that's this spring right here. Here's your factory firing pin. Pointed end goes to the rear. Drop it down in the notch. Look in there and be sure it's against, the other end is against the stop. Alright. The titanium firing pin slides in. You want to slide it in just like this. Front, then the back down, and then forward. And if you do that, you won't have to worry much about that little spring being in the right place. Alright. Now drive the roll pin back in. Remember what I told you about the solid part of the roll pins to the rear. So if it's not that way, you want to take it all the way out and change it. Okay, now the firing pin's in. Now you look here, you push it forward against the stop. Okay, now at the same time, when you push it all the way forward, you want to be sure that the point of it's not sticking up past the face of the breech block, because if it does stick past the face of the breech block, that means that it'll put a little dimple in the back of your barrel. And most generally they'll be just a few thousandths short of flush with the face of the breech block, like 5 or 15, somewhere in that area. Alright, firing pin's in it, not too long. Now we'll put the extractor in. Alright, now with our extractor, here's a factory spring and plunger. We're going to remove the factory spring, and we have a spring that's slightly stronger than the factory one. Get it on here. Alright, we replace it with our slightly stronger spring. Slide it in the groove, in the hole. Now we're going to, this is where you got to watch out that you don't let the plunger fly and lose it. So we get the sharp claw extractor. It should drop right in there when we get everything just right. So we get it ready to put it in. And we're going to pull the plunger back, holding our finger over the front of the hole, so if we slip off, it won't be shooting across the room. Right there. Drop that in there. Just like that. When it gets in the right place, you can let off of it. Check it. Alright. There you are. Looks like it'll work good. Sharp claw extractor, extra spring, titanium firing pin. And we're ready to put this in the receiver. So we get the receiver, barrel receiver. I usually like to leave the barrel in them until we get ready to change the barrels. So you take your titanium extended operating bolt handle with your stainless steel spring guide. Now you see this is a keeper right here. You want to be sure that when you get done that this little spring's not left in there, that little pin, because all that does is hold this together during assembly. So you put it in just like the factory, line the point of it with the detent, pull the operating bolt handle to the rear, put the factory bolt in it, locks. Now you don't want to let it fly forward if that little keeper spring's still in there, and it is. Don't turn it around, maybe it'll fall out. There it is. See there, it fell out. If it don't fall out, use long nose pliers and take it out. But don't leave it in there and let the breech block go forward, because if you have this completely assembled and the breech block goes forward and this is in it, it'll pull that plunger far enough ahead that it's possible the point of it will become disengaged from that recess in the receiver here at the back. So we're all together right there. Now, at this time, we have the bolt stop cross pin out. So we'll use one of these Buffer Technology buffers. Generally you can push them in with your fingers. Basically this is a type of a nylon buffer. Keep it from coming back so hard, and you can really tell the difference when you're firing the 1022 whenever it goes to cycle. It doesn't have a real sharp crack at the end of the bolt travel, so you can feel the difference. Alright, buffer's in there. Come on here. Gotta get everything lined up before we try to get the pin in. Okay, safety off, clicks. Safety works. See, it works a whole lot better now than it did. It's just perfect now after we worked it a few times. Alright, now the next thing we can do, we'll put the double big headed safety in since we got it this far along. And generally, if I do it right, you'll see how easy it is to do. If I do it wrong, and you lose that little spring and plunger for the safety, if it comes out, that means you got to take the complete trigger group apart and put the double big headed safety in, just like we did earlier with the factory safety. You got to hold that spring and plunger down until you get the safety in it and it engaged in the two little detents in the safety. So the way this works, if when you assemble this into the 1022, if you're right-handed, this red is on the left-hand side, like that. And if you're left-handed and you want to turn the safety around, when you assemble it, you just assemble it from this side with the red on the right-hand side. And that's all there is to it between the left-hand safety and right-hand safety. So what we'll do, we take these three 30-second Allen keys. Generally these are loose enough you can unscrew them with your fingers when you get them. You take your double big heads off. These come also in stainless steel. The body part of the safety is all tool steel, and the big heads are blued steel or stainless steel that's bright. Alright, now here you go. Now since I'm right-handed, we're going to leave it a right-handed safety. So that means this red goes on the left side. So all we do, turn this up. Now you rotate this safety, the factory safety, around until you're on the high side. In other words, the full diameter side of that safety is holding the plunger in. See if we can get it right here. Right there. Alright, be sure we got it lined up with the detents towards the plunger. That's this away. So we just push it through, hold the safety in with one thumb like that, and then push the new safety in. That's all you gotta do right there. New safety's installed. Now if you want to, you can put the big heads back on it now. Now there's one thing about it, before you put it back in the stock, you have to remove these big heads, because you can't get it in and out of the stock with a big headed safety on it. There you are. Safety's on. Push it there, shows red here, it'll fire. If you want a left-handed one, you do it just opposite. So there you have the big headed safety. Now we'll take these big heads off. Now you don't want to turn your safety once you got it in there. So you put an Allen wrench in one big head and one in the other one, and unscrew them or tighten them at the same time. Because if you rotate that safety, then that little plunger will cam out of those detents and it'll jam up the safety. So you don't want to be turning your safety. Once you get the safety in there and in the right location where it works, don't be rotating that safety or getting a hold of them to turn. They'll turn, but you got to put a little excessive pressure on them. So there we are. Now we're ready. See, we can actually put this back in the stock if we want to use the same factory stock. Just drop her in there. Safety sets in the middle just like the factory. Then you can put your big heads on and you're ready to go. Now what we're going to do with this one, we're going to go ahead and put a custom barrel on it and put it in a Hogue stock. So for right now, we'll forget about this factory stock. Now put the safety kind of in the middle, dig it apart. Alright, now the action's complete. That's all we need to do to the action at the present time. So we'll remove the barrel. As we did before, we use the Allen wrench, break these loose, and then take them out with the long driver. Alright, what we're going to do now, we're going to install an aftermarket heavy barrel. Now there's about 15 or 20 different barrel manufacturers. We've used several barrels of most of the barrel manufacturers, and we've never received a barrel that didn't shoot pretty decent. So I think you can be pretty safe in saying that most of the aftermarket barrels, regardless who they're made by, are pretty decent barrels. The main thing about them is that they're usually 920 in diameter, and the heavy barrels are just straight 920 from end to end. That makes your rifle heavier on the muzzle, and it seems to point and lay and stay on target a little easier, and that's probably the reason they're more popular than the skinny light barrels. But there seems to be a trend now to try to make the 1022s as light as possible. So you got carbon fiber barrels, different kinds of injected molded barrel sleeves around steel liners, and aluminum sleeves around steel liners to make the barrels lighter. And they all seem to work pretty good. Anyway, one thing you want to look at on these barrels, especially the aftermarket barrels, see where this machine groove is here for your extractor. You want to be sure that that comes right out to the edge with only about 5 thousandths of metal right in this area. You don't want a wide area of solid metal there, because if it is, that's one of the reasons that you can't pull a case or a loaded round out of the chamber. Once you chamber, that extractor actually is unlatched from the rim, and it lays up on this bevel right here. And as soon as you pull the breech block to the rear, then the extractor has to slide down. There's got to be enough of the rim of that case sticking over this surface area right here, this little edge, for that extractor to grab it to pull it out. And generally, people that have trouble extracting cases, generally, if you look, you'll find that the barrel, this area here, is not as thin as what this one is right here. And you need to take a little file and go in there and file that back down to where you got about a 5 thousandths edge right there on that corner, right on the radius right there. You want a little slight chamfer on the chamber right there, and you want that to be about 5 thousandths wide. That's about minimum. If you get less than that and you go into this chamber, then when you fire the cartridge, it'll bulge right here, and if you get into it too far, it'll actually rupture the case. So you got to have metal supporting the case all the way around the rim of the case, but you got to have a minimum amount of metal here for the extractor to grab the rim of the case. So with that in mind right there, this one looks alright. We'll go ahead and call it. This is just like the standard factory. It depends on the draw block to pull it up to receiver. Now there's quite a little discussion among shooters about aftermarket receivers that's threaded. And the idea of having threads on the barrel screwed into a stainless steel threaded receiver is a good idea. It's probably more rigid than anything else. But I've talked to a lot of shooters that shot competitive competition, like those that shoot in the Chevy Truck Challenge, and done a lot of experimenting with these. And they say after the 1022's all tuned up, there doesn't seem to be any difference on whether it's this type of a system that the barrel's held in the receiver or a threaded type. They all seem to shoot good. So with that in mind, most of the people, of course, will be buying this type that goes basically just like the factory. So all you have to do is put this in. Now sometimes these will be tight and you'll actually have to put the receiver down on a block of wood and press the barrel in, or put it in with a mallet. Alright, the barrel goes right in just like you took the factory one out. Put your draw blocks in there, put your driver on them, on the screws, socket head cap screws. Generally when that draw block pulls up even, the barrel will pull up in true alignment, so the extractor groove is in line with the extractor and the bolt. You can always look at it. It falls right in line. So all we do now is use the short end of the Allen wrench, torque them in good and snug. Like I said, you're looking at something like maybe 80 inch-pounds. Alright, there's your heavy barrel. The next thing we can do with this, we'll mount the scope base on the receiver. Then we'll be ready to put a scope and scope rings on it, put it in the Hogue rubber stock, and we'll be ready to take it out and test fire. Alright, we're going to use the receiver mount scope base. And I forgot to tell you a while ago, but all of these are black. This is black, what they call hard coat. And even though this is aluminum base, the surface of this is something like 72 on the C scale. It is real tough, so it's not just regular anodizing like most people think. And all of our products that are black are hard coat black. So basically, all you do is the holes line up with the receiver holes, and you use this 3/32 Allen wrench, which is the same size as the ones that fit your double big headed safety. I like to use some medium strength Loctite. Put some on the screw and wipe the front of the screw off so none of the Loctite gets into action. There's one thing about it, the aluminum receiver, you don't want to make the mistake and try to over torque these screws, because it's very easy to strip out the aluminum threads in the receiver. So it's nice to use Loctite, snug them up good and snug, and don't take the chance of stripping them out, because if you do strip them out, the only recourse you have is to put a larger screw, probably be an 840. Then you need to get a gunsmith or somebody that can do it to drill out the holes in the receiver base, and then drill out the receiver holes and tap them to the larger size. That's all you need to do right there. Just snug them up. There's one thing, generally you won't have this kind of trouble, but it's a good idea to be sure that the point of the screw does not go clear through the receiver and bind the bolt in it. And I haven't seen it happen for a long time, but you can look in there and they're about a half a thread short of going all the way through the receiver. You can see the front of this one. But if that bolt starts binding after you mount a scope base, it's a good idea to check that, because that could be one of your problems. So right now we're ready to mount a set of scope rings on it and a scope and put it in the whole rubber stock and go out and test it. Alright, with the barrel in the receiver, all the receiver parts assembled. You can mount your favorite choice of scopes and your scope rings onto your base. Get it mounted on there. Now we're ready to put it in the Hogue stock and go out and test it. So be sure the hammer's cocked. Place the safety belt in the middle, just like you do with a wooden stock. Slide that in just like that. And with a proper fitting screwdriver, good and snug. Check to be sure everything's free. There you are. All we got to do is put the big head safety on. Turn it up. That in. Alright, now I'll show you how to tighten this up. Hopefully we don't have to take this back apart again. Put the double big heads on. Alright, now you put the short end in the safety in one on the left side, one on the other side. Now at the same time, without turning the safety, just turn the two Allen wrenches, the two screws that hold the double big heads against each other like that, and that snugs them up. And you want to be sure they're free, not rubbing the stock. Sometimes if you got a wooden stock, the stocks hang down so far that possibly the big head could rub on the stock. So be sure your safety is free from rubbing on any wooden stocks. They seem to work perfect on the Hogue rubber stocks. This is one of my favorite choices of a Plinken 22 that make an awful fine squirrel rifle. Custom alterations are installed, all the aftermarket parts in the 1022, along with a heavy blued barrel and a Hogue stock, and we've already mounted a scope on it. So we want to be sure that the firearm functions. So we'll load a magazine here. A 10-round magazine. Hearing protection, safety glasses. Here's a firearm after it's completed and we're ready to test fire. Install the magazine, hit the operating handle, safety's on, we're ready to fire. Flawlessly. This one's ready to be zeroed in and get back to the customer. I'd like to thank you for being with us today in our Power Custom shop. I'd like for you to know that Power Custom is a business that's been incorporated since 1972 and is family owned and family run. We have numerous amount of gunsmith tools and fixtures that's available and have been available for many, many years. And we're always looking for new products. So if you have any kind of ideas on something that can be done better, or any gunsmith tools that you might like to have, well, I'd appreciate your input, and I welcome you to be with us again here in our shop, and I thank you for using our parts and our product. And for those of you that's gunsmiths that have viewed these illustrations and have the ability to install our products in a professional manner, you will find it very profitable. And for those of you who are customers that are able to install our products yourself, you'll find a large savings. I'd like to thank you for watching these videos and we'll look forward to see it again here in the Power Custom shop. Thank you very much.